This week on Clearing the Air, we're going to catch up with Cameron. He's another new Mainer working on this project. We'll learn a little bit about what he's working on and also what's the one thing he would say to other Mainers about why this project is so important. I'm Thorn Dickinson. This show allows me to talk with Mainers working on the most important clean energy project to ever come to our state. We discuss how this project is providing jobs and other benefits today while creating clean energy for a better tomorrow. So thanks a lot for doing this, Cameron. It's great to have conversations with people that have recently come on board. Maybe tell me a little bit about your job right now and what you're doing.
When I came on board, we had some estimates in place about what we're going to be paying out for property taxes to the different towns throughout the state of Maine.
Yep.
So this year, now that we've started construction and have some things in place, we're actually starting to pay out some of the property taxes. So my role, I'm actually going through and looking at the property taxes and kind of updating our estimates and projections for what we have going forward.
To me, the property tax area was really a fascinating one because when I was out in the communities talking to people about some of the benefits of the project, this is one that they were skeptical of. In hearing that, we committed on the project to the values that the University of Southern Maine provided back in 2017 as a floor for all the towns along the DC corridor, and that if the values end up being higher, the towns will even do better. So. Were you familiar with that commitment?
I am familiar with that commitment, yeah. What we've seen so far, it looks like we may end up actually paying out a little bit more than what was estimated, so good for the towns of Maine.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too was, at least the way I communicated it early on, was really talking about once the project was in service. So it was, as I learned more about property taxes, I recognized, oh no, we have to actually start paying property taxes even earlier. So as this project is going forward and these early capital investments are being made, it's exciting to see that some of those benefits actually tangibly happening in those towns.
It is. It is really awesome to see that money going back to my state.
The one big one I had heard about was Lewiston. And I got a call just before they were about ready to do a press conference, and they talked about the fact that even though I think the valuation was like $100 million, and that was just a fraction of the amount that will be invested in Lewiston over the whole time, they said that $100 million was like the largest increase in their values in over 10 years, and it allowed them, amongst other things, to balance the school budget and make sure that there weren't significant cuts in athletics and programs and stuff like that.
So I grew up in Auburn across the bridge there, so it's great to see some money coming in to Lewiston. I would love to see it come to the other side too, but Lewiston's great. I'm really glad to see that coming in for them.
Actually, I seem to remember a letter that we got back, I think it was maybe 2017 or 2018, where we got a letter from Auburn asking if there's any way that we could move the converter station to their town. Unfortunately, that wasn't a possibility. Where we are locating the converter station is really important because it's entering into the really strong part of the grid. But so you grew up in Auburn. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Auburn.
Yeah, so I grew up in Auburn, lived there for most of my life, and just recently my wife and I just moved down and bought a house in Scarborough here. So kind of a lifelong Mainer.
Yeah. So is that where you went to high school and stuff like that?
I did, yeah. I went to Edward Little, graduated in 2007, and took 4 years down at Wake Forest in North Carolina and came right back home to Maine afterwards.
Did you have a little bit of homesickness, or did after 4 years you just knew that that's where you wanted to go, or?
So I have a lot of family here in Maine. I actually grew up with, my parents lived right down the road from two sets of my cousins and my grandparents. So we had a lot of family, and it was really important to me to be back home near the rest of them. We spent a lot of summers out at hoop basketball camp in Casco, Maine. My grandparents started the camp back in 1971 and have been running it. So we were part of the third generation to come through and work the camp and live out there all summer. So I have a lot of fond memories living out on the lake and just being in nature. It's a very old-fashioned camp, minimal electricity. I think they just got Wi-Fi maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So it's a very kind of rustic camp that I've really enjoyed for my entire life. grew up playing basketball. I played basketball at Edward Little and eventually went on to coach the 7th and 8th grade boys team at the middle school for a couple of years there. So basketball's that's my sport.
Most Mainers were aware of the project, and obviously the project was in the news prior to you coming on board. What was your perspective originally about it, and then now that you've been associated with the project for a little while, maybe talk about your thoughts?
Yeah, so my first kind of exposure to the project was very early on with a lot of the advertising that came out actually from the opposition about how we were clear cutting a lot of the state and doing all this really bad stuff for our environment. And then as I learned more, I really was like, wait a minute, that's not true at all. It's actually a very minimal impact on our forests, and for what it's bringing in with clean hydropower and the property taxes, as well as hopefully reduced energy rates or electricity costs, I think it's a no-brainer. I'm very optimistic. I'm hopeful that people will see the project for the good that it can do for the state, and make sure that we get to continue this work. I think it's very important to me that this goes through.
You know, if you're talking to your friends or other Mainers about this project, what's the one thing that you would want them to know about it from your perspective?
It does a lot of good for Maine. I mean, there's not one thing I would necessarily pick, just there's so much good that it can do for the state. I think it's important to support these kind of projects and make sure that we do these kinds of things for Maine, because it's what's going to keep this state being great.